Hey everyone, welcome to another Webflow workshop. This is episode 117. And if you're new to these workshops happen every other Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, usually on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/webflow. So if you haven't subscribed, do so now. Also, what we do on these streams is usually we do a simple basic layout of or a rebuild of a page to help you understand Webflow a little bit and show you the power of what you can build Webflow really easily. But at the end of every quarter, we do a special workshop where we get to ask questions. The whole community gets to ask questions to our CEO of Webflow, Vlad Magdalin. So he's here going to answer your questions that you have already posted and anything else you want to know about the past, present, or future of the Webflow company and the product. So let me get him on the stream right now. All right, he's on stream. Hi, Vlad.
Hey,
Yes.
how's it going?
Good, good. And you?
I'm doing great.
All right, awesome. Let's see here. So we've been super busy for the past quarter, and the last time we talked to you was back in December, right after we launched Interactions 2, and that was a huge deal. I mean, that was
Yep.
something that the whole community has been waiting for a long time. Now, in between December and today, April, what have we been doing? You know, it seems that we've been like on full throttle since then.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. We just published a blog post that outlines some of the big things that we released that we've been working on. One of them being site search, and then another. There's like some mini features that might feel like they're not huge things, like a single item published, but actually required quite a bit of work underneath the hood to get right. And we've also been working feverishly behind the scenes to get cross-site copy paste going, which is our number one requested
Oh yeah.
community feature. And that had, when we started working on it, we sort of thought like, well, you would want to copy nodes and some styles across. But then when we started actually building it, we figured out how complex of a feature it actually is, because there's interactions 1.0 and 2.0 and assets, and sometimes those assets are not like part of the same site. You have to like copy them across behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
ran into a bunch of problems with like SVGs and all these random things that we never imagined would cause so many delays. But it's right around the corner. It already went into alpha with some of our experts, and there's a ton of other stuff behind the scenes, not to mention the obvious one, like e-commerce.
Very obvious.
Yeah, yeah, that are happening on our product and engineering team, that you're just going to see feverish updates in the next few quarters.
Yeah.
That are going to open up a lot more use cases, a lot more. You're going to see Webflow expand as a web design platform, not just as a design tool and a place to run your small sites in production, but it's gonna expand to more professional use cases, more of the things that clients want, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes that we haven't announced yet, but I'm super excited about there's the part of the roadmap that's visible externally, and the roadmap that we have internally that we're all really excited about. And then we just can't wait to get a lot of that information out to you guys once it solidifies a little bit more and we know more about how close it is to launch.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of things that the community has been asking for. I mean, we've been working on it day and night. So yeah, props to the whole team, and especially the engineering team. They're just making magic. For the people who are in the live chat room on Crowdcast, go ahead and start asking your questions in the live chat room by clicking on the Ask Question link at the bottom, and we'll get to them right away. But yeah, if you haven't seen that blog post that Vlad's been talking about, go to webflow.com/blog, and I think it's the first link, or actually first link under new, and yeah, you'll just see what we've been working on. Let's go to the questions. Are you ready, Vlad?
Yep, let's do it.
All
Rapid
right.
fire.
Rapid fire. Okay. The first one was written in Russian, but
Good thing
yeah.
I can read Russian.
Yes. So can you read it off for us?
Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Well,
Влад, вы
if
бы
I
не
do,
могли бы сделать региональные цены. Не поймите неправильно, мы прошлую лавочку Adobe Muse прикрыли. So basically, what he's saying is, don't get me wrong, but my last piece of software that I used, Adobe Muse, is being shut down, and Webflow is one of the alternatives. But please understand that $16 per month in Russia is way less accessible than it is in Europe and the USA. It'd be great if you could help somehow. So we've been thinking about this a lot. Actually, at our last company retreat, it was one of the top, if not the top, idea that the team came up with as a way to get Webflow into a lot more hands and make it a lot more accessible globally, not just in U.S., Canada, Europe, etc. And one idea we had was something we call localized pricing, which kind of uses this. There's this concept called the Big Mac Index that compares the purchasing power across different countries based on how much a Big Mac costs in that country. And there's a way to sort of like stabilize pricing based on that index. The downside with that is that it takes a long time to engineer, and it's something that we're continuously trying to figure out how we would do that on a technical level. We use Stripe for all of our billing, and we'd have to build in essentially however many pricing plans we have, which is already a lot, times the number of countries that would have these different pricing rates in a way that is scalable and in a way that's not overly burdensome for kind of like manual billing, etc. So it's something that we're continuously looking at. It's like it's something that we know we have to do at some point. But honestly, it's not an area where we started engineering yet. It's still in the research phase, especially as we figure out all the code that we need to get right cross country for e-commerce, because e-commerce makes things so much more complicated.
Oh, yeah.
And if we were to, for example, roll out localized pricing and then do e-commerce, that would slow down the development of e-commerce significantly. So it is something that's top of mind for us. It is something that the team cares a lot about. We just don't know when we'd get to rolling out something like that. So it's kind of like a TBD when we'll be able to get to localized pricing.
Yeah, kind of complicated. And now that you actually explained kind of an overview of what has to happen. All right. Hopefully that answers your question. We're going to go to the next one. Jorn is asking, are we working on CSS Grid?
Good question. We're not working on CSS Grid. If that, we haven't announced anything yet, but we are prototyping a ton of solutions with what we call grid layout. And I'm happy to say that we've finally arrived on one that's been really well received by user testing. We just don't know when it's going to land, but we see the capability that CSS Grid gives in the land of layout, and how easy it makes creating complex layouts, especially across breakpoints, as just a fundamental jump in capability that it adds to the web platform. And we absolutely will have it as part of Webflow. It's something actively being worked on right now. So it's in there's with prototyping wrapping up, we now finally have a kind of an idea of what the final product will look like. I don't know how long engineering is actually going to take, because it's a very complex feature. It's going to bring a lot more into what we call direct manipulation land, where you won't have to go necessarily, like with Flexbox, you kind of have to go to the style tab to make changes. With CSS Grid, there's going to be a lot more of the drag and drop direct manipulation aspect to it, which is going to take a bit of time to develop. So, but it is one of the top 3 priorities for us right now, along with e-commerce. So it's coming.
Nice. Much easier than Flexbox. I like to hear that because explaining
But you'll still
Flexbox.
Flexbox is still useful in many contexts. They're sort of complementary. But yeah, it is. It's not going to be a full replacement for Flexbox because CSS Grid uses some concepts from Flexbox. But it will make it much more. I mean, it's called Grid, so it's great for grid layouts.
Yeah.
But it's also not exclusive to grid layouts. Like you could use it to lay out something that's even on one row, that has sort of like a one row grid layout. So that's I just don't want to set the expectation that's going to replace Flexbox and that all the time you've spent to learn Flexbox will go to waste. That's not at all the case.
Good to know.
So knowing Flexbox actually makes Grid easier to understand, but it's also not a prerequisite. Like Grid will be a much closer parallel to some of the direct manipulation design tools that you're probably used to if you're using something like Sketch or something like that.
Okay, cool. All right, here we go. Next one. Aaron Ocampo is asking, is Webflow's new e-commerce feature going to support subscriptions?
Not in the first version. So that's something that we're evaluating. And when we launch the first version, it's going to be physical products. And then we'll have to evaluate over time, like how much demand there is for both subscriptions for digital goods and subscriptions for like physical things that you receive in the mail, like a box a month type of things. So that's still TBD. Like that's not something that we're targeting. If you look at the landing page for e-commerce, the splash page that sort of breaks down the different feature based on phases. The subscriptions is not something that's going to be in phase 1.
All right. Here we go. Next one from Stu. This is a good one. I get support tickets for this often. GDPR. Any news on that?
So we have a very detailed blog post coming April 11th, I believe, that talks through all the steps that we've been taking to become compliant with GDPR and some guidance for everybody who's publishing sites with Webflow that might capture some information from European citizens. Like if you have, let's say, a lead form or a contact form that could capture information from a European citizen, like a first name and last name or an email, something that can identify a real person, then we're going to have some guidance for you on your responsibilities and some features that we'll be adding to Webflow to be able to abide by the rules that the European Union is setting. So for example, if a person requests to be deleted, then you will be able to remove them from your form submissions. And there's also some requirements for kind of the secure, like the biggest thing for Webflow is we have to formalize all of our security practices, how we store information. Thankfully, we don't store a lot of personal information. So we're not like a healthcare company or a Facebook that's like trying to capture everything. Our business doesn't rely on data, but we do have to formalize all the things that we do, all the tools that we use to make Webflow better. So for example, if we use Google Analytics to track how many visitors we're getting to our website, we have to make sure that that's disclosed in our privacy policy. It already is, but we have to add some things around like anonymizing IP addresses and things of that nature.
Which we've already done.
So we're working with a lot of our vendors, actually 100% of our vendors, like Stripe, like Mixpanel, like MailChimp, etc., to make sure that we have the required data protection agreements to make sure that if you're a Webflow customer, then you know that Webflow is fully GDPR compliant.
Nice.
There is a separation though. In some cases, Webflow is the data. So the GDPR adds these two categories where in some cases Webflow is in GDPR terms is the data controller. That is things like when you create a Webflow account and you give us your first name and last name, we are the controller of that data. In some cases, though, we are the processor of the data where we have no knowledge of what the data is. So, for example, if you create a form on your website and you happen to add a field that asks for somebody's resume or something like that, then we have no clue what that data is. In that case, we are the processor, and in those cases, the website owner becomes the data controller, and that's where you have to make sure that you are compliant with all the regulations that come with creating an experience that captures user data. But that's nothing new to kind of the realm of website development. Terms of service and privacy policy, et cetera, have been required by things like Privacy Shield and other types of regulations in the past. So it just means that everybody has to become more mindful and treat privacy as a first principle, which we at Webflow have done from day one. This process just formalizes it across every company that might have any sort of touch point with European citizens, which I think is great because just because it only applies to European citizens doesn't really change like the way that you have to comply. I think it like de facto applies pretty much to everyone. Everyone gets the benefit from those data and privacy protections. So while it may seem like a something one new thing to have to comply with, I think it's great for users across the board. What Europe is trying to do to formalize a process around companies not being loosey-goosey with the data that users trust them to hold on to, which we've seen with the whole Facebook fiasco lately. Like when people don't really understand what they're sharing or how that data is being used, that ends up just eroding trust, and like nobody likes having the feeling of their data being misused.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Very detailed answer. And again, April 11th, there will be a blog post. Yeah, that answers a lot of people's questions. Okay, next one. Ooh, okay. This one is with 5 votes from Jason. All right, Jason. Question 1. Oh, it's a 3-parter. Will e-commerce include filter and sort capabilities? Ooh, that's a good one.
Depends on what you mean by filter and sort. It will have the ability to do the kinds of filters and sorts that are possible with our current dynamic lists. We're still looking into the ability to actually externalize that into a widget that gives your website visitors that ability. Kind of what you're used to with like faceted search, etc. We don't know yet if that's going to make it into the first version.
Okay, yeah, but it's in our minds because
it's being considered for sure. Yeah. There's a lot of technical kind of underpinnings to make that work, which it may seem straightforward, but because we have site search, etc. But it's a whole new set of requirements.
Okay. Question 2: are there any plans to enhance the search results snippets, allowing us to have more control over the appearance of the text displayed?
I'm not sure which one. Search results snippet. Isn't that like completely customizable at this point? Oh, of the text,
yeah.
The actual. I'm wondering if the question is the actual text, or the appearance of the text, like using styles and classes.
I think you could already style it. Jason, if you could ask your question in more detail in the live chat room. I'll see if I can get back to it. I think he put appearance of the text displayed. I think you could already do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And you don't have to answer question 3, but what car do you drive?
Skip.
Okay. All right. Thank you,
Most
Jason.
often Toyota Highlander.
Ah, there it goes. Family man. All right.
Exactly. My wife strictly forbids the purchase of any minivans in our family. So
Nice.
that's the closest you get.
6 votes from Highwell, I think. The most important question. Ooh. Who is the genius who narrates your videos? And I'm guessing it's the university videos. Who is that genius? He is a genius.
Uh, yes, I think he still prefers to stay. It's a synthesized computer voice powered by AI. But there's a certain individual that is the primary trainer of that AI, which we're not really ready to reveal yet. But in our new office that we're like having built out right now, there's going to be a live video studio, which might mean we're going to have to like create some sort of physical presence for this virtual being.
Okay.
And you might start to see more and more of them
Is it just
in
going
the
to be
future.
a avatar of this trainer, right? A hologram?
TBD. It's to be determined. We'll have to see.
We're working on a hologram technology just for
Yeah.
him. All right. All right. Let's see here. Wow, a lot more questions. Here we go. 5 votes again from. Well, we already got a question from Jordan. Let's give it to someone else. All right. 2 votes from Chris. Will you be adding GBP to the client billing in the near future?
Wait, where is this? Uh, oh, GBP.
Mm-hmm. To the client billing in the
Um,
near future rather than just US dollars.
Good question. I don't know. We'd have to look at what. So we piggyback on what Stripe supports.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure on how we do that conversion at the time being.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chris. 3 votes from Patrick Burnett. Will there be an easier way to upload all of our assets instead of one by one? Maybe a library.
You mean like images? I think we can already like drag a ton of files from the desktop
Yeah.
into Webflow. Is that what the question is?
Well, so the image asset or the assets manager, you can already drag in like a all at one time a bunch of images and assets and whatnot into the assets manager from your desktop. But I think this one is about probably collections because I know I've tried to make my own workaround image gallery and I would have to
Mm-hmm.
drag in one for each image field. Say I have like 5 image fields for
Oh,
one.
I see.
Yeah, so that
So
one I have a question
so
for.
we are working on something called the image set field, which
Ooh,
is multiple images on one field, which will power things like boxes, CMS galleries in the future. Maybe and that one will for sure have the ability to upload multiple images at the same time. And I'm not quite
nice.
sure if we allow uploading multiple non-image files at the moment because we allow uploading things like PDFs and
Yeah.
into the asset manager, and I think that's supported for multiple files where you don't have to do it one by one, but we'd have to check.
Okay. Cool. That's awesome. Image set. Let's see here. Let's go to this is a good one from Crusader Digital, and we've been talking about this for a while now. But when can we expect the plugin marketplace?
I've been asking the same question. I know we're actively working on it right now. It's something that we want to get really right internally and with some internal testing before opening it up. A plugin marketplace is something where if you don't get the API right from the get-go, you can get into like some really, really buggy software, which we are starting to see more and more with like all these sketch plugins, where just the combination of a ton of plugins have started to lead to just like a suboptimal experience. And we're still in the process of building. So for example, all of e-commerce is built on new plugin API that we have internally, with the goal of which is to make it external in the future. But we don't have timelines yet as to when that's going to be ready for the world to see. It's basically something that we foundationally know that is important to build into Webflow, which is why all new features like site search, e-commerce are built in a pluggable way. But it's still not ready for prime time. I mean, it's ready for prime time in the sense that all the features that Webflow ships, which are amazing, are using that like bits of that architecture. But I think it's only when we are fully comfortable with everything running on that new system that we're going to be opening up, because pretty much every single new feature that we've built, we've learned something new that needs to, in some cases, fundamentally shift the kinds of capabilities that plugin API has to have. Yeah. So it's once we have all these sort of like known use cases built out, like CMS Gallery, like pagination, like all the different components that are already in Webflow, like nav bars and Lightbox, e-commerce that's coming, etc. Then we'll have high confidence to say, okay, this is now kind of powerful and generic enough that many other things can be developed on top of it.
Baby steps, but we'll get there.
Yep. Yeah, it's not something that happens overnight. I wish, but
yeah. Okay, here's one from Alexandra. Okay. I would like to know if the e-commerce feature obliges the website to be hosted in Webflow. Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into e-commerce, similar to something like Shopify, etc., that it just becomes impossible, would be my estimation, to make it generically exportable. There's just so much that goes into it. There's order management and sending emails and processing orders, processing payments, hosting everything on HTTPS, PCI compliance. Like all these things are, I think if you're doing it, on your own with code that you're exporting from Webflow, would be completely overwhelming. So for us to even like kind of have a scope that we can define and ship to our customers, like we have to make the assumption that we understand where this is actually going to be running. We have the ability to predictably process payments, etc. I think if it was something where it was kind of like we're trying to make it work on any PHP service or any hosting provider, I just like there's never been a system that enables something like that outside of the huge players like Magento, etc., that require 2-3 developers and many months to get an e-commerce experience going. So yeah, that's it's sort of a major requirement, but it's also a huge advantage, because it means we take care of all these things that you wouldn't have to worry about. A lot of the things I mentioned, PCI compliance and HTTPS, so like hosting over SSL on the same domain, making sure everything is super fast across all countries and points of presence, not just like running on one server in Virginia or whatever. Yeah. So all the benefits of Webflow, like super fast hosting, image optimization, the CDN acceleration, et cetera, come with e-commerce. So
yeah. All right. Thank you. Here's one about forms. Let me see here. Where is it? Where did it go? It was a good one.
Oh yeah, can you elaborate on planned improvements to forms? I'm seeing it here. autoresponders. So we're investigating two things right now: file uploads inside of forms, which is the ability to, let's say, like upload a resume or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's already being scoped out, and engineering has already done some investigation on what it would take. And then I think there's also some work being done on adding CAPTCHA, like the reCAPTCHA tool inside of a form, but I'm not quite sure what the technical scope of that yet. I've just observed some conversations around it, so no promises. It's just something that we've seen quite a bit of investigation around internally.
All right, cool. Let me scroll all the way back up here. There's four votes. Okay, from Doug. He's asking, any plans for a giant breakpoint, things beyond 1200 pixels?
Yes, we've had those plans before, but we had to put them on pause, unfortunately. Right now we have a plan for like what we call an XL media query, but it actually went back into design once we released Interactions 2.0, which revolves a lot around changing interactions across different breakpoints. And there's some complexity around the screen requirements, the screen size requirements that Webflow has on a lot of, like, one of the advantages of Webflow is that it runs on Chromebooks, and most Chromebooks have a limited screen real estate in terms of width. So right now, the largest breakpoint on a standard Chromebook actually fits in Webflow with the sidebar. However, with an XL media query, it doesn't. So we have to find a way to either support some sort of zoom mechanism or allow you to scroll back and forth. Like, we don't want to just say, this is only supported on large screens. And we have to keep in mind all the sites that were created in the past and make them both backwards and forwards compatible with a larger breakpoint. So that's introducing some complexity because Webflow kind of cascades down or inherits down from desktop to tablet to phone landscape to phone portrait, etc. Introducing a new breakpoint means that we're introducing a bidirectional type of inheritance or cascade model where when you go to, you still treat that main one that we have as the main one, and then you would make some tweaks to the extra large one. But that means some changes to how, like, the selector works and to how we present inheritance and cascade in that little selector dropdown. But we're doing some experimentation. We hired somebody who created a tool that is similar to Webflow, but has like zoom in and zoom out functionality that can be really beneficial in kind of like presenting a larger breakpoint on smaller screens just by zooming out. So we're doing some experimentation around that to see if that could be an approach. But it's just like, if everybody had a huge screen and we said, only for new sites is this the default breakpoint, only on larger monitors, it'd be a much simpler problem to solve. But because we have like these constraints around like the large number of students and people who use Webflow on a Chromebook, we have to like think around how to make it work.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, thank you, Doug. Number 5 with 5 votes, Nicholas. He's asking, how will pricing / billing structure will change? How will pricing and billing structure change when e-commerce is launched?
Honest answer, we don't know. So we have to. It's one thing we learned with site search is that we wanted to do the right thing and just include it in the existing plans. And then when we actually launched it, our servers took a huge hit because of like all the reindexing that was happening. And we didn't understand the load, the additional load that would bring to our servers. So now we're like reworking a lot of site search stuff to understand exactly how much it costs us to deliver that service. and bring it down to where it's a lot more palatable, because we had a lot of hosting subscriptions where we had to pay our Elastic, which is kind of like an Elasticsearch provider, where just due to the number of you'd have huge sites with thousands of CMS items, so all these things have to reindex, and they were happening all the time, where that would cause a strain on our servers, and like the cost would, if you actually draw it out over time, would not be sustainable. So with e-commerce, we don't know yet. We have to actually get it into alpha and beta and see how like all this expanded functionality actually kind of how our servers can handle it, but also we want to see how like where that like how much value the e-commerce experience adds to the alternatives today, and sort of consider that as an input into how valuable a service like visual e-commerce would be. So we have yet to determine that. I think as we get people actually playing around with it and building sites and seeing that experience in like the alpha and the beta testing that we'll be doing, we'll have a better picture. But honestly, right now we just don't know.
Yeah, makes sense.
One thing I know for sure is that it won't be available on the basic plan, because it requires CMS functionality. Like a lot of e-commerce is built on the CMS, but it also adds a lot of complexity to basic CMS. So we have to figure out exactly how the pricing is going to shake out.
Okay. All right, makes sense. Let's see here. Let's go back up. All right, 7 votes from Ildi, I think. Can you provide an update on the timeline for pagination? Yeah. Cool.
Yes. We have a developer starting on it today.
Yes.
It's actually something that is, like I mentioned, is reliant on our new plugin API.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a bit of a blocker, and we just had a developer free up. Don't know timelines around how, like what we might run into. Like there's a lot of features where we start developing them, like nested collection lists, for example, where we actually develop them, but then we figure out some large constraints like performance considerations or things that can crash sites or whatever that can really slow down development, or it might cause us to reevaluate something. We know pagination is like a must-have. We're actually surprised with how innovative people have been with like working through that limitation, not having it as a kind of a first-class citizen in Webflow. So we know that that's a must-have feature, and that's like I mentioned, top 3 priorities. It's definitely up there. So I think there's some limitations on the current approach, is that you can only have one paginated list on a given page, where you can't have, let's say, featured products and then something else, and then both have pagination that would persist in the URL. So right now the limit in scope is that it would be 1 per page, but we've done a bunch of research, and it seems like for most intents and purposes, having multiple paginatable lists on a single page is not the kind of a practical use case. When you have things like carousels and sliders on a page, like on Hulu, for example, you might have multiple things that scroll. Usually those are just like non-persistent carousels that they just load everything and then you just sort of page through them.
Yeah.
But yes, pagination's coming. We're working on it now.
Cool. All right. I think a lot of people are happy about that one. See here. Scroll down. Let's see here. All right. And live chat room, if you want to upvote a question, go for it, so it's more visible to us. So that way we know what you want to know about. Okay. From Nicholas, when is Webflow going to have a feature to allow usernames and logins and client portals? And there's already a workaround for this that someone in the community has been writing about and doing video tutorials on with Firebase, but our own native one, are we working on that?
So I said in the last Q&A that we're not actively working on native user systems yet. It's something that we know it's going to be important longer term, especially like, for example, for e-commerce, it introduces the need for user accounts to see order history, et cetera. That is like it builds the foundation for something like full-on user authentication. With the recent announcement that Muse and Business Catalyst are being sunset by Adobe, there's been like a new sort of focus on whether it might make sense to have a limited set of functionality, sort of like secure zones in Business Catalyst, where it would be something like a combination of our current password protected pages feature, but make it possible to limit that to specific user accounts. So you would add users from some sort of CRM to a kind of specific page or route or dynamic item, and then gate access to that content based on the login. So that's something that that's a reduced scope that we are considering in the shorter term, but like full on user accounts where you can create like an Airbnb kind of login system with user generated content that's rendered based on the logged in user. That's not something that we're actively working on right now.
Okay. Right. Let's see here. With 6 votes, client billing feature. I want to know if the client billing feature is in for a remake anytime soon. And I think you've already answered a little bit about this for GBP, but anything else for the future of client billing?
So we're expanding it to more countries as Stripe allows more countries to get access to Stripe Connect. We don't have any like major revamps planned to that feature. We are looking through the possibility of adding like consolidated billing and annual billing for client billing type of accounts or hosting subscriptions. But that's still TBD. So there's no major, it'd be kind of interesting to see what specifically is meant by that question.
Yeah, it's very vague, but not sure what a version 2 would look like for client billing.
Right. Yeah. So I want to address like, I'm noticing in the live chat, there's question by Ildi. It looks like we didn't read the entire question when it came up. So let me get to that.
Sure.
So can you provide an update on timeline for paginated collection lists, which we addressed? This was first suggested in December 2016. Can you provide some insight into why it takes so long to implement a feature that is clearly really important to your users, but also important when claiming that Webflow is a great substitute for WordPress?
Yeah.
Without pagination, this claim is being made loosely. I'd go as far as to say it's false advertising. So this is a loaded question. We have, if you look at our wish list, to some person, and we have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of users now actively. Something is like a must-have feature, right? So this is something that felt like a must-have feature in 2015 when we were launching the CMS, and we deliberately, in order to launch the CMS 3 months sooner, we decided to cut scope and remove it. So it was a constant reevaluation of like what are important use cases that separate like what you need to do to get the job done and what can potentially have workarounds. So in the original, I think it was October 2015 launch of the CMS, we did some user surveys and asked like, would you rather have a blog that doesn't have pagination sooner rather than wait 3 more months, which was our estimate at the time for pagination, like 3 months later. And overwhelmingly the feedback was just let me blog sooner, because Webflow didn't even have the ability to blog at the time.
Yeah.
So, and then when we actually released it, we saw that people were coming out with like really innovative ways to just work around that. They would create like a new page in a folder called page 2, and then they would create a sorted collection list that sets off by an offset. So for all intents and purposes, like simple pagination worked. It just required some workaround. But to just address the core question is, well, there's two here. Like, one is the implication that we're doing false advertising, which I just fundamentally disagree with. Like, we are a good alternative to WordPress. We know that WordPress has a 15-year lead on us. We know that we don't support a lot of use cases there. Like, you can't run an editorial workflow the same way that you can run in WordPress. You can't have scheduled posts even like you can in WordPress. We've run into some technical challenges there. There's so I can make a multi-page list of the things that we don't offer that WordPress does. It's going to take us some time to catch up, but we fundamentally believe that in some cases, and in more and more cases, Webflow is way more approachable than something that is more code oriented like WordPress. And yes, it's going to take us more time to kind of catch up with a lot of those use cases. And it might seem from the outside that we're just like ignoring these big use cases, but we're always making the call based on the information we know now. So we don't necessarily feel bad for saying like, hey, check us out as an alternative to WordPress or Squarespace or Muse or Business Catalyst. We know we're missing like a huge amount of features there, but we're always trying to play catch up in a way that still feels like a Webflow product, because we can build e-commerce literally on top of like WooCommerce or something like that in 2 months just by integrating an existing solution, but it wouldn't be like a Webflow offering that is fundamentally easier to use for designers and can get like 10 times as many people into this practice of web design and development.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. That little part you just said, making it easier to use for designers, and the whole platform Webflow has always been about helping designers take control of the whole development process as much as possible and removing as much technical barriers as possible. I know that one thing, whenever I show people who use WordPress, one thing I always show them is the Webflow CMS editor, and showing your clients how to edit their site without using any technical terms like components or module or anything, or even having to go to
Speaking of components, we're going to be using that term a lot more.
Well, I mean, when you're talking to your client on how to edit your site, you just tell them, click this, start typing, click publish, you're done. Whereas other ones, you have to go to a completely different UI and press publish and refresh the browser just to see, does it look like the way I want it? And so, in that sense, I really feel like Webflow is further along.
Yeah, well, the other drawback to developing something for Webflow is that we have not only the functionality that we need to build, because every CMS has pagination, right? It's almost like a copy paste. You come up with the query structure, you need to find out how many pages you have, and then you sort of like write the HTML and CSS to or the PHP or whatever your backend or front end language is to make that happen. But in Webflow, something that seems easy requires a lot more thought in how to make that every single element of that pagination widget be completely customizable. So here's an example from form uploads, right? Like, we want to add in the forms that you design a file upload field where you can press a button and upload, let's say, a resume, and have like a little spinner that shows that you're uploading, and then show the file name and have the ability to clear that or whatever. In a traditional web app, you would just kind of like build that as a button, have the ability to like style it kind of the default way, and then tell any users that, if you want to customize it, here's like the templating language and the style sheet, and go nuts. But in Webflow, we have to create not only that base functionality and how it publishes on the page, but all the visual tooling around, okay, now I have to switch into like upload state. And how does that look like? I need to be able to add an animated element in here of my own choosing because I want to create like a super custom form submission experience.
Yeah.
And then I have to decide on how to display that file and how much fits and how to do that layout in many different states, sort of like our form submission, like unsubmitted, submitted, success, error state, and all those things. And that requires so much more thought around like building that feature. So it might seem like table stakes, but it also has like this elevated scope. Same thing for our e-commerce, for example. Typically, every single e-commerce provider, if you want to change the layout of your checkout experience, you're in like development land. You have to write liquid, you have to like figure out PHP, you have to like trawl through these templates that have all this technical jargon, and you get one semicolon wrong, and there goes your entire kind of like customization experience. We have to make it possible to like infinitely customize our checkout and cart and like that whole experience in the way that people would expect from Webflow. And that just takes a lot more time. It means like we're kind of inventing new ways to do things, which is sort of our long-term vision. Like we want to empower millions more people to build software visually. And that starts with websites and it's going to move into like more complicated websites like e-commerce experiences, then web apps, then et cetera. But that requires a
lot of research,
a new way of thinking.
Yeah. Like I always tell people, it's easy to make something. It's easy to make something hard to use. It's hard to make something easy to use. All right.
Sure.
So I mean, if you think about it, one day it's going to be easy to take a self-driving car that takes you from point A to point B by just hailing it from your phone. That's easy. But all the research and all the testing and everything that has to be done to make that easy is really hard.
Right.
So that's what we're doing. Next question from Stu. General question. I like this one. Where do you see Webflow a year from now? And how's the new office?
I mean, there's going to be a lot of changes in the next year with e-commerce, and we've mentioned on our wish list that we're working on multi-language support. There's a lot of things foundationally going to be happening around components. I think a year from now, Webflow is going to it's going to be clear that it's moving closer and closer to like a way to build production, like really, really powerful websites beyond just landing pages, et cetera, where we're going to go toe to toe with some of the huge players in the space, but have it be 10 times easier to use. The new office is just a couple blocks away from our old office. It's we're putting up walls right now. It's unfortunately the place was not in a good state. So we're the thing I'm actually most excited about there's more space. There's more kind of even though we're a primarily remote company, it's still nice to have like a place to call home in San Francisco. But the biggest thing I'm excited about there is a studio, like a soundproof studio we're building for our education and marketing and just community teams to have more of these kinds of kind of live chats and more educational content. We're hoping to get to a place where we're pushing it out daily. And right now we're kind of like in a super scrappy mode of creating these videos because you can create a script and then we literally sometimes have to, because of the road noise and babies crying next door, we have to like rent out a hotel room on the 50th floor in San Francisco and specifically ask for it because like that's the best thing we can do for noise isolation, so you don't hear fire trucks or blaring outside or something like that.
Yeah. All right.
So it's gonna be nice.
Cool. All right. Probably last two questions. Let me see here. What's been voted up? I think this could be a simple one. Asset galleries. Is there? Let's see here. Can we pin? It's a pin to organize
It's
images at.
I think it's an impression. It's really hard to organize images
Oh,
currently.
okay.
Yes, we are. We've already scoped out a feature we called CMS galleries, which are essentially image galleries that can be either static or connected to a CMS field. One thing I mentioned previously was we're researching the addition of an image set field.
Yes.
Um, Again, no timelines on these, but we already have all the designs. We just have to figure out kind of front and back end engineering, and that's a part of our development pipeline, which we're doing a lot more at a given time now. But we have to figure out with the constraints that we have. Like I don't know if you remember in the last Q&A, we talked a lot about how important for us as a company to remain a fundamentally financially strong company where we are operating off of the revenue that we get. We're not beholden to investors. We're not like borrowing money just to stay afloat or whatever. We want our customers to know that if they trust Webflow today, they can trust Webflow to be around 10 years from now. And part of the reason why development is sometimes constrained is that we hire new developers and new team members as we're able to afford it. We're not the typical startup where we're just like, all right, let's hire a team of 40 and figure out how to do it, and then kind of put the health of the business at risk. So that's why we're trying to get to a process where timelines are a lot more predictable.
Yeah.
But with the amount of things we're working at the same time and like the complexity of some of them, it's not always possible. I totally recognize the desire to know exactly when something is going to ship. I ask the same question every day. It's just something that's when you're building something so hard, it's a lot of times you run into constraints and hurdles that you don't anticipate, and then you have to go resolve them.
So you ask the product managers every day. You're like, so what are we doing today? What are we doing? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. Let's power. I have another
Yeah.
30 minutes actually.
Oh, let's keep it
We
going.
can power through questions, and I'll try to be more concise.
Okay. All
Thanks
right.
for the reminder, Oliver.
Awesome. Let's go, Scott Stevens. I would love a horizontal break line and rich text elements for blog posts. Is there ETA on that? Oh yeah, HR tag.
Uh, yeah, HR tags. So we're almost done revamping the entire way we do rich content to standardize it along with all the other type of nodes and elements we have in Webflow. So that foundational work is almost complete. We're going to be shipping it. I think we've continuously been shipping it, but that creates the foundation for adding something like HR tags. What is it, like superscript, subscript,
Yeah.
things like that
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make the rich content more powerful.
Cool. All right. Daniel's asking, do you plan on creating an offline standalone program for Mac or Windows?
Something that's standalone is a lot more likely than offline sooner. So one thing that's super hard for Webflow to work around is the impact of external resources affecting layout. So something like a YouTube video sometimes will have different it needs an internet connection to load,
Yeah.
and then it contributes to height or width that might make something wrap around. So you might spend, if you're offline and that thing can't load and we have to load like a placeholder, or something like fonts from Typekit. If you
Yeah.
load fonts that don't have an internet connection, it makes that problem just fundamentally harder to deal with. So what we're looking at right now is first a kind of a desktop app to just wrap Webflow essentially, but also no timelines on that. It's just an experiment. We have like this thing here where people can work on sort of like passion projects or side projects on Friday afternoons, and that's one of the ones that I've seen some traction on, where it makes it easier to get access to Webflow, but it's not quite offline yet. To get it fully offline, we have to create like this abstraction layer between external services like AWS and S3 and Typekit, YouTube, etc. And we just don't know. Like honestly, up to this point, it hasn't been like a huge demand to get something like that working. People would rather have something like e-commerce than they would have a static site builder offline. Or at least that's what we've seen in our user surveys. So ideally, that's what we want to get to where you can work on Webflow offline, similar to Google Docs, and then it would sort of like sync the differences and figure out, okay, if you made some changes that somebody else made and you were both offline and somehow reconcile them, which might be in the same exact design. We don't know, but there's no active development work going on there right now, but it is something that we're thinking about.
Cool. Yeah, I see that question a lot, especially from the Muse community. All right, so let's go to Cohen. Oh yeah. So one question, Vlad. Please don't forget the small things we need as designers, like CMS Lightbox, image resizing, CMS sliders. So dynamic components.
So that's the main reason we've been working on a plugin API is to make these things possible. Like image set, the image set field that we're working on is the prerequisite to something like a CMS Lightbox, because then you can just link it to a set of images. I'm not quite sure what's meant by image resizing here, because we have image resizing in the designer, but I'm not sure if that's related to something else. And CMS sliders is also on the roadmap. We just have to kind of get the foundations right first.
Okay, cool. Let's see here. Do you know if we'll be able to convert div blocks to link blocks easily in the near future? Could be as easy as clicking a button. Question by Oliver.
I've heard that come up more and more recently, and I really don't see why we couldn't get that to happen. Even I could probably code that in my Friday afternoon time.
Oh, there you go.
Let me think through that. I think there's some things that div blocks. So there's some considerations there. Like let's say a div block is inside of a link block.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you have to stop that from happening, because you can't have a link inside of a link in HTML5. So it's something that seems simple that maybe is more complex. Maybe we can start it as like a shortcut feature where, if you know what you're doing, you could just press like Command LB or something to link blockify something. Because I know it is kind of a pain to drag in a link block, drag in all of those items individually, assign the same classes, delete the div block, and vice versa. So yeah, something we should definitely look at. Is that on the wish list? That should be on the wish list. Upvote that.
Yeah. If it's not on the wish list, I'll post the wish list link in the live chat room. You guys, go ahead and put it up there, vote on it, and everyone comment on it saying, "Do it, Vlad." All right. Let's see here. Pagination, we already answered it. Plugins, we already answered it. Dynamic slider components, already answered it.
So there's a question, the top one that I'm seeing. Will Webflow ever consider letting users host their own websites, just like we're able to host our own WordPress websites? So it's already possible with static websites today. You can use the export feature available on the Pro plan. Just for the same reasons I mentioned for e-commerce, it's probably unlikely for super crazy features like site search, e-commerce, etc. That just requires way too much. It's sort of like Business Catalyst, allowing you to run it internally behind a firewall or something. There's just way too much developer effort that needs to go into to make that happen. So I think there's a subset of sites for which Webflow will always be able to work in the way that you want, just like export a landing page or whatever. But as we build out more of these use cases like multi-language, which requires you to detect the URL or detect the locale of the user, and do a lot on the back end. The more of these back end features that we add, it's very hard to replicate that by by just copying it to a server. I think WordPress, Magento, like huge frameworks like that, are an exception because they're completely open source, and it requires a ton of developer effort to make all that work. So I think we just have to kind of play it by ear as we keep developing Webflow. But so far, the feedback that we've gotten from the vast majority of our users is that it's amazing that we take care of everything. Like you do the design, you do the collaboration, you do the content architecture. You press a button, you get a staging environment, you collaborate with your client, you press a button again, it's live on your custom domain. You make changes, you press a button, and it's there. We take care of all the details. So with WordPress, you'd still have to like go and host it with WP Engine or whatever. I mean, I know there's a lot more kind of like lower cost alternatives. But at the end of the day, what we're going for is just ease of use across the board.
Yeah.
So that when you're thinking about becoming a web designer, running a web design shop, or running all of your marketing on Webflow, as many more companies are starting to do, it's like a one-click seamless operation. And for us, user experience is so much more important than the flexibility of where can I host that code, because that ends up being such a small delta and involves so much technical work that it's just it's hard for us to optimize for.
Okay. All right. Ooh, this is one that's come up a couple of times. Multilingual sites. Where are we with that? By Buddha or Buddha.
So we already announced on our wish list that we're going through the technical scoping process of multilingual sites. It's a big priority for us.
Nice.
It's coming.
Coming soon. All right.
I don't know about coming as soon as, so it's definitely going to be after e-commerce. E-commerce is in heavy development, like going through testing and user testing in some cases. Multi-language is still at the scoping stage.
Okay. Mike from Early Hiring. CEO question, boring but important question. What is your stance on diversity and inclusion at Webflow?
Great question. We believe that a more diverse team leads to a better product, leads to better culture internally, better everything really. And if we look at our last out of our last 10 hires, more than 50% have been in some sort of would be categorized as an underrepresented, whether it's a woman in tech or a person of color, etc. Like that's a huge focus for how we hire. We want to make sure that we're definitely hiring the best person for the job, but we go to an extra mile to make sure the candidates that we're seeing are a very diverse set. Because if we just look at, for example, the people who submit to our AngelList profile or just our website where we list our job postings. For example, for our technical jobs, it's like honestly 90% men. So we have to take extra steps to go out and increase the diversity of our pipeline, which if you do correctly, you actually find really amazing people that maybe didn't even know about Webflow as a company, or didn't have enough confidence to apply, or whatever it was. And in many cases, we learned things where, for example, somebody who would join our team would say, well, I actually didn't want to apply before because I read your job description and it actually was not very, it had some kind of like these micro statements that made it seem like it wasn't too friendly for her to apply, for example.
Interesting.
And just by going out and being more proactive to look for more candidates, we've been able to hire some amazing people recently.
Nice. Here we go. Okay, this is a good one. Susan McPhee. asking, will there be more granular permissions system? Most of my clients need more access than what they can do in the CMS editor. It would be
Hmm.
good to give clients designer access with custom limitations, like we can for like we can do for editor, but still
Hmm.
be able to perform client billing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It'd be great to get on the wish list, like what specifically you would like your clients to do or not do. Like, can they delete a bunch of classes? Can they like mess up your collections? I think that's where we have to like really understand what the ask is, and what you'd like the capability to be. I think over time we'd like to see less and less separation between the designer and the editor, because a lot of times there is a lot of like repeated functionality there. You can like manage CMS items in the editor and manage CMS items in the designer. And there might be an approach to where it's just like different modes of the designer potentially once the editor gets more and more access to design level things, and then the kind of the designer experience. You want to do more things that we allow in the editor. Like, for example, why don't we allow editing CMS items directly on the canvas in the designer, but we allow it in the editor? Sometimes like that could
Yeah.
feel a little bit more unified and harmonious. So yeah, it'd be great to understand like what exactly those what you'd want to see there, and that's what the wish list is for. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, I see this one asked here and there. Any plans to allow different actions based on which form is filled out? For example, send to different emails based on the form. I know that there's workarounds using
Hmm.
Zapier, but
Hmm.
will we have anything native?
Not in the short term. So Zapier is really flexible in what you can do with it. I know it's another tool to figure out, but it's very unlikely in the short term for us to add that kind of functionality, because you could do so much with Zapier. For us to try to even like touch that kind of functionality would take a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think in the short term I would really be comfortable learning how to do something like that with Zapier, because it gives you so much flexibility.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Send that data anywhere you want, almost anywhere you want.
Hmm.
Let's see here. Chucky is asking how far along is adding search to the showcase. We'd like to find other flowers in our area to create community.
Good question. I'd have to go ask. I think there's been some conversations on making our kind of the discover area of our like the showcase a lot more built out. Like right now, we have some conversations around making teams more of a first class citizen there. Like right now, it's not even possible for teams that are on the team plans at Webflow to showcase the projects that they've built or make them clonable or whatever. So there's some improvements already going into that space. I
Mm-hmm.
don't quite know where we are with considering search as an option. Another great thing to put on the wish list.
Yes, yes. Side question for myself. After being 5 years, being a fan of Webflow for 5 years, are we
But Nelson,
calling
we've
it
only we've only been around for 4 years. How's
okay?
that
Four and a
possible?
half.
Just kidding.
Webflower or Webflower or both?
Uh, pass.
Okay, I'm gonna use both then.
Yeah,
All right.
it's sort of like it took. So we're great friends with the team that runs Zapier, and almost everybody says Zapier, and then it's not until they kind of came up with a tagline like Zapier makes you happier, that they finally coalesced on a proper pronunciation. Although I think from day one they were kind of Zapier. It just a lot of people read it a different way. But I don't know. We'll have to come up with the de facto way to do that,
Okay.
to refer to web flowers at some point.
Okay.
Why not both?
Yeah. Why not both? Okay. From Meow. Sure. I hope this is not Deathcat, but Meow is asking, will there be marketing tools with the new e-commerce release?
It depends on, so there's quite a bit of kind of email customization, and you'll be able to do all the different things that you can do with Webflow to create like landing pages, marketing promotionals, etc. We're not quite at the point where we're doing a full, CRM where you're going to be sending kind of promotional emails, etc. So that is kind of TBD right now. It's something that could come in later stages, but it sort of depends on what you mean by marketing tools. We're probably not going to replace your kind of primary way to interface with customers anytime soon, but who knows what the future might lead to.
So, side question for me with that thought. Would e-commerce be able to connect to Zapier and then connect to other marketing tools?
Yeah, I mean, e-commerce is built fully on our CMS API. So all the things that our current CMS API allows, at some point we'll have e-commerce extensions for as well. I know there's already a lot of kind of e-commerce integrations with our friends at Foxy, et cetera, where you could already integrate an e-commerce solution into Webflow CMS today. You have to do a lot more custom work on their end, but like most of the time they have like great templates for that stuff. And I believe they already use our e-commerce API or our CMS API to make that work, to make sure like inventory is updated, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. This one's e-commerce as well. What about Amazon integration? I see that listed on the e-commerce long-term list.
It's already being scoped out. It's something, since it's mostly backend work that we have to do there's two factors there. There's Amazon Pay, which is, checking out with Amazon, which I'm not quite sure where we landed with that yet. The other one is making sure to get products that are listed in Webflow Commerce into Amazon and other marketplaces. I think that's the one that we're heavily considering for the future, but it might actually be accelerated because it's primarily backend work. We'll have to see. But we do think, in today's e-commerce world, it's not like you don't just sell in isolation. And there are huge platform effects to kind of using existing marketplaces that make it easier to kind of manage everything from one place. And Amazon has been like one of the top requests in our private surveys that we've done for our e-commerce offering. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the first things after like the core functionality is built out to be added to e-commerce.
Cool. That'll be exciting. I think. Do we have anything? Let's see. Okay. By Andrew Hirsch. When do you think we might see something along the lines of a designer/preview window that can be a fixed height within the workspace? This would greatly help with designing for smaller breakpoints without having to constantly resize my window height.
Oh, interesting, like a phone view or something like that.
Yeah. I think we had it in a previous commercial or something with Chuck, where you actually see the actual device.
Yeah. Well, actually, the first version of Webflow had the actual device, and you can still see it on playground.webflow.com, which is like it barely works now because browsers have changed their implementations. But that's honestly the first time I hear that request. But it makes total sense. Like I design in Webflow all the time, and I'm always kind of, having to actually publish it and look at it on your phone is not necessarily the best solution when you can preview it in Webflow. Get it up on the wish list, and let's try to get it up there. I'm not saying that wish list is the only thing we use in terms of prioritization, but it's a major factor in determining what to work on next.
Yeah.
which is why cross-site copy paste is about to ship, because it's so high up there. I
And
mean, it's number one.
And actually, I did see the prototype of you talked about it earlier in this stream of like zooming out and seeing
Hmm.
different sizes of your site. So I could see something like that where you zoom out, but it's actually the fixed
That doesn't even
height.
require zooming out. It's just sort of resizing the height. That also implies like what that implies with it is vertical media queries as well, which might some folks might expect. If I resize to a phone,
Yeah,
then I want something to be vertical heights. But if I resize higher to like a tablet, I might want like 100% height or something like that.
yeah.
Um, and since we don't support vertical media queries yet, that might be, if we ship something like that, like folks might be more disappointed that that's not included than they were with that functionality missing in the first place. So we have to, like, that's something, like I mentioned, it's the first time I'm hearing it actively from a user, from a customer. So let's get it up on the wish list and get more conversation going around it
Okay.
to learn more about like what the expectations actually are.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna take the last two questions. Let's see here. I'm gonna scroll all the way to the bottom, see if there's anything new that wasn't upvoted high. Landon's asking about update on cross project copy paste. We've already had a webcast about that, and people are being invited to the alpha, and so that's moving along really fast.
Yeah, the latest update I have on that is the last piece we have remaining is interactions 2.0, like settings being kind of carried across with the thing that you're copy pasting, especially when it comes to targeting by class-based elements. I think that's been the tough part.
Okay. Follow up from Jason. He was asking about the search results snippet. He says, follow up from my previous question, and you asked for clarity. Are there any plans to enhance the search results snippet, allowing us to have more control over the content of the text displayed? Like Google search engine results page, where you can control the content of the search results text. At the moment, we have little control over the content that's being displayed. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen any discussions around that. I know we're adding a description, kind of another field that you can bind to in that search snippet, in a upcoming kind of minor point release of site search. But I'm not quite sure if there's been any kind of discussion around adding more control over the actual text that's displayed there. Something also, I'll keep saying this, like let's talk about it on the wish list or the forum. It'd be good to understand, like, specifically, here's what we have now, here's what it'd be great to have the flexibility to do that makes it more tangible for us to determine if it would be feasible.
Okay. Marcelo's asking, when will Webflow start accepting client payments from Brazil? And I think Stripe.
Client payments, like client billing, when Stripe supports that as a Stripe Connect country, I believe.
Yeah.
So we're kind of at the mercy of it means that, like, being kind of so tightly married to Stripe means that we can develop much faster, but also has some of these drawbacks of Stripe not being available everywhere. So that's one of those things where we have to wait for them to release a certain country, but they've been on a pretty rapid clip of introducing new countries. So I think there's a page that we have on our support portal where we show all the countries that are supported and that are coming up, and it links to Stripe's list of beta countries. Sometimes they announce like things that they have in beta where you can like ask them to be part of it, and then that helps us understand better when we could add it to our client billing.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna take one last one. Oh, this is a good one. It's from a guy named Andrew, who's actually part of our customer success team. So I'll get one more right after this one.
Yeah,
It's not fair.
that's not fair.
But what has the community team and mission meant to you as Webflow has grown so much over the last 4 years?
Sorry, repeat the question.
What has the community team and mission meant to you as Webflow has grown so much over the last 4 years?
So I'll speak to the mission first. When we first started Webflow, the mission was much smaller. Like we wanted to create another alternative for a WYSIWYG website builder. But then when we saw, we didn't even have hosting. We could do multiple pages. There's definitely no CMS. But as we have seen the community grow, like seeing the excitement, by the way, when we first launched, our honest opinion was that we couldn't launch, like nobody would pay us for anything until we had a full CMS, until we had things like, pagination, etc. We didn't end up adding those until 2 years later. I think it was more than 2 years later, 2.5 years later, at which point we already had something like in the close to 10,000 customers. So we were like really surprised at the uptake of people adopting Webflow and building like some crazy awesome projects with it. Like some of the things that we've seen are incredible. And it's only been over the last few years that we kind of realized that the future potential of Webflow is like 100 to 1,000 times bigger than what we imagined it to be in the first place. It's sort of like the first engineers working on 3D animation software. They're not imagining like the creation of Coco or like some Toy Story 3 or whatever. They're just trying to kind of get something that's hard to be a little bit easier, and then you get surprised with this amazing creative power of what people are actually able to do by stretching those tools to their limits. So that over the last 3-4 years has been really inspiring, like seeing the kinds of things that people are building in Webflow in production, like actually pushing them to the real world. Like we have like hugely funded startups that are running their entire marketing teams off of Webflow, pushing to their .com page. They've put so much trust in our design tools and our hosting infrastructure, etc. And that has only led to the expansion of our mission. Like now we're imagining like not just websites, but web apps and the ability to create any kinds of software in the future, like essentially democratizing access to this like really powerful medium where you can create an entire business at your fingertips, which is what a coder is able to do today if they have all the skills required, but getting that barrier to entry so much lower. And that over the last few years has just been, I've personally been getting more and more excited. Like sometimes when a company starts to scale, you kind of like, you have more things that bog you down. Shoot, I think there's somebody, can you hear that?
I heard
like
something, but I don't know.
There's like a leaf blower outside. Sorry about that.
It's okay. We can.
Yeah, I need to find one of those hotel rooms that's 50 floors up next time. So it's been really incredible to see the community grow. Now we have like YouTubers and people like organically starting like discovering Webflow and doing so many cool things with it. And that's something I'm so not used to. 3 years ago, people were just bashing Webflow left and right. Like WYSIWYGs are never going to work. And I can't do X and Y. Therefore, this kind of solution is not going to take off. But now we're seeing actually start to gain adoption. We're starting to see like meetups start to happen. We're seeing like people build some incredible things with Webflow. And the more of these tools that we add to the platform, like e-commerce, like multi-language support, like grid layout, et cetera, are only going to, like, I can't even imagine the kinds of things that, a year from now are going to be built, let alone 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And the community has just been incredible. Like the fact that our entire QA, part of our product team, our entire customer success team at Webflow is from our community just speaks volumes, because people get so excited about, like, in many cases, it like literally changed people's lives where they were able to make a living where, they knew the power of code before and they had access to the same kind of tools you have access today, like WordPress, yet they just weren't able to do the kinds of things that they're able to do with Webflow. And when people realize that they have that sort of capability, it's been amazing to see how much they're able to share their experience and their time to help others come to that same kind of realization, which has been a huge blessing for us, because we can see the community sort of like training each other, and kind of like compound on that shared knowledge, which is like, makes it more exciting for us to work on the things that we're working on, because we know that people are going to be excited when we release them. Of course, there's like the tension of like not shipping this stuff fast enough, but it's only been more and more encouraging over like each month and each quarter and each year, what the future potential of Webflow could be.
Cool. All right, and last one, I'm gonna give it to the creator of this crowdcast, because he's actually in the live chat room right now. So, Sai, thank you for being here. Yeah, give the last one to you. Where can we hire your voiceover guy at Webflow University? So good.
So we keep him. We keep that technology sequestered in a secure area, validated by our GDPR security efforts. So that's sort of our secret sauce. It's kind of like, when you know how to make Coca-Cola, you don't publish the recipe.
There you go.
So I apologize ahead of time for not being able to make that happen.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Vlad, so much for giving us an hour and a half of your time. I know that I speak for the community when I say it's very nice that you would come to the community and talk to us directly and answer our questions directly, because it just shows how much you care for it, and it shows how much the community is so passionate about this tool, and we're all growing together. So thank you so much for your time.
And thank you to this community. It's just incredible. You all keep us inspired, and the fact that this community is even here is I'm just feel indebted to all the people that offer their time and offer their enthusiasm and their kind of the efforts to make Webflow more of a reality. Because without this community, we'd just be a tool. We'd be kind of in the background, trying to make something in isolation. But the fact that you all are there to validate what we're doing, to keep us inspired, to keep us accountable too, honestly, is an incredible partnership. And I can't think of a better product and a better team and a better community to work on. So I just feel incredibly just proud and blessed and lucky to be able to keep moving Webflow forward. And we hope to deliver some awesome things to all of you to make your lives easier and to make it easier to run your business.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. And with that, we will say goodbye to Vlad until next quarter, right? Do this quarterly,
sure.
And where we will be.
I'm not gonna commit to monthly yet. Last time I switched from yearly to quarterly. Let's do this for a couple more quarters and see if
someone's asking for monthly.
No. Last time I self-volunteered for quarterly, but I think it's great to have more FaceTime.
Yeah, quarterly is good. So yeah, at the end of next quarter. So yeah, we'll see you. Thank you.
Awesome. Take care.
Bye. And we're out. Oh, nope, not yet. All right. So that was fun. A lot of questions. How many questions did Vlad answer? 36. Oh, man. That's a lot of questions. And he also gave us an extra half hour of his time. That is so awesome. And I didn't even know about the image sets, so that's news to me. And that's going to make making galleries much easier. I know I have to make some workarounds, and I know I had to have Bartosz, our senior QA lead, help me coding that thing up. But thank you guys so much. Let's go through our ending titles, okay? If you're new here, we usually do rebuilds and whatnot. but this was our quarterly Q&A with our CEO. If you need any account, billing, or technical help, please go to university.com/contact, and I and the rest of the support team will help you out as fast as we can. Join the community. You're already in the live chat room. Join the community. Introduce yourself. Tell us about what you do as a hobby besides web design and stuff like that. Go to forum.webflow.com, find the introductions category, and post your story there. Also, if you have a question about Webflow, about design or custom code issues, ask that question there, and our helpful community will help you answer that question. And do me a favor. If you get your question answered, help someone else and answer their question so we can all grow together, right? You can find us on the social medias, on Twitter at Webflow app. You can find me at The Pixel Geek. Instagram is Webflow app. Facebook.com/Webflow. YouTube.com/Webflow. This stream happens every other Tuesday. I will see you guys next time. And as always, make the web beautiful. See ya.